Good morning and welcome to Newsviews. I'm Judy Hsu. The U.S. will honor its veterans later this week, but a group of African-American men from Illinois who served in World War I has received little recognition for their loyalty and service to this country. They're the men of the 370th Infantry, many of them from Chicago's now Bronzeville neighborhood. A new documentary titled Fighting on Both Fronts tells how they fought the war and also fought against racism. During our first half here, we will talk with the writer, director, and also the grandson of a member of the 370th. And in our second half, we'll learn about a nonprofit helping veterans transition to the civilian workforce. Well, let's get started right now with Mario Tharp. He is the writer and director of Fighting on Both Fronts, the story of the 370th, and also William McClellan, the grandson of a man who served in the unit. Good morning. Nice to have both of you here this morning.
Thank you for having us.
Well, let's start with you, Mario. Really push this, project forward. You said it took about a year to launch this documentary. Tell us why it was important to tell the story of the 370th.
Because it's an unknown story. When you talk to people and you ask them about the 370th, they don't know what you're talking about. And I like to talk about how when you drive down King Drive, and at the intersection of 35th and King Drive, there's a monument that represents these soldiers, and it was dedicated or given to these guys in 1927. And people don't know about it, and that's why it's so fascinating, because it's an amazing story, and we cover a lot about the soldiers and about Bronzeville, which was known as the Black Belt at the time.
So let's talk about this unit. It's a unit made up of, what, 3,000 men, all from Illinois, mostly from Chicago?
Right. There's some from Metropolis, Illinois, from Springfield, from Danville, Peoria, but the bulk of them came from what was known at the time as the Black Belt, Chicago's Bronzeville area. And these guys range from everyone from teachers to lawyers to pastors, like his grandfather was. So they were your everyday men, and a lot of them were professional men. And they went off to war. And it was a National Guard unit. And they were redesignated the 370th when they went off to war.
But they were treated a little differently when they went off to war.
Oh, they were treated not like the other soldiers that were fighting in World War I over in France. I mean, you have to remember the time that it was a lot of racism and discrimination, and these guys wanted to show their patriotism. They wanted to show America and white America that we are Americans and citizens too, so please treat us as equals. And they didn't have that opportunity. Again, they faced a great amount of discrimination here in the States. And then when they went off to France, they still faced the same amount of discrimination, to the point where they were not even allowed to fight for with the American Army. They fought alongside the French Army. And they stood steadfast and fought well and received a number of awards. And we talk about all of those things in this film.
I want to bring William into this conversation. So your grandfather was a part of this unit.
Yes, he was.
You are actually part of this documentary. You were able to voice over parts of a book that came from some of the notes and journals that he kept. What was that like for you too?
It was amazing. I had copies of the book, and I've read through it numerous times. It's been a part of my legacy and in my family since I can remember. I'm 67, and so it's been a huge part of my life. And I have a picture of my grandfather, which I believe is in the documentary. And it's been there as far as I can remember at our old ancestral home, as we call it. And it was an incredible feeling to be able to not just read his words, but to voice them, and try to voice them in a way that I can imagine how he would say them, because he was a very, very passionate, very articulate man.
How did he feel about the time?
My grandfather, of course, passed away before I was born, but I've heard numerous stories from my mother, my aunts about him. He was very staunch in his beliefs of the strength of the black community and the black man. He had been in the Army since 1888. And it was ironic that serving in World War I as the chaplain, he was 46 years old, which in today's standards was not going to happen, especially in a combat situation. But his was full of leadership. He was the founding pastor of Berean Baptist Church. And at that time, Berean was equivalent to some of the mega churches that exist today. Numerous numbers of dignitaries and politicians were a part of that church, and he was a leader in the black community. He believed in the strength of the black community, and he was and a wonderful, wonderful family man. Growing up in my house and listening to stories of him, it was just so full of love and strength. And so anytime I'm named after him, which is a big, big, big blessing for me, and just to be named after him and to hear the stories about him, I feel like I've known him all of my life.
This documentary covers so much, also about their time at war and the time that they came back home and how they were treated after that. Tell everybody how they can see this.
Yeah, well, it'll be premiering this coming Friday, November 10th at 8:30 p.m. on WTTW.
I look forward to seeing the documentary. Thank you both for coming in and sharing a part of it with us here this morning. And so when we come back here, we will hear how a Chicago nonprofit is helping men and women make the transition from the military to a civilian job today. We'll be right back.